My name is Jeff Myers. I'm the managing editor of Concentrate, which is a weekly publication that is based here in Wahstenaw County. I also run another publication called Metro Mode, which covers the region of Metro Detroit. Although, to my mind, we're all the region of Metro Detroit, which I guess gets to kind of our conversation today. We try to do these speaker events roughly once a month, but out that way. Sometimes a little sooner, sometimes a little later. If you ever have an idea for a topic or just want to send feedback for future ones, my email is jeff@concentratemedia.com, so feel free to shoot me something. Just so you know, I guess here at Conor O'Neill's they've been stacking up events like airplanes at Detroit at DTW, so we have to be out of the room at 6:30 so they can transform it into an event wonderland for the next guest. The Concentrate Speaker Series is sponsored in part by the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. Also, we'd like to give thanks to Conor O'Neill's, who generously lets us use this space. So when we do these topics like today, the regional transportation, one of the things we like to do is try to take as much as a macro perspective as we can. That's why we often invite people in who are not necessarily in our community, so that they can offer thoughts or examples, or just experiences that we can apply to the things that are local. We try not to get wonkish in the nitty-gritty of what's going on here, although that may happen when we do questions and answers. But the idea is to get people some food for thought on these topics. Transportation, actually, from my perspective, from a personal perspective, is actually something I have a particular passion about. I've lived in a lot of communities that had very well-developed regional transportation systems. I basically moved here from Portland, Oregon, and part of my basis of experience comes from that. I also lived for a while in Seattle and Chicago and a few other places. I'd like to always have, as part of these events, a quote. I usually try to dig them out. Jane Jacobs usually, rises to the top quite often. It's a little tougher to come up with a quote about regional transportation. So the quote I'm going to use to get us started, to put it mildly, is a bit odd, and so you'll have to bear with me here. Fritz Todt was an engineer and senior figure in Germany's Nazi government in World War II. And while I'm loath to use a quote from a Nazi as a launching point for our discussion, I think he has an observation that can apply here. In making a case for Germany's ambitious road construction at the time, he said, "These roads do not serve transportation alone. They bind our fatherland." And one of the things that has occurred to me moving to Southeast Michigan as a region is one of the things we struggle with is this idea of being a community that is bound together. When you take into account all the cities and towns and townships and individual municipalities and government entities, despite our geography, it's hard to see us as one identity of a region. Ann Arbor seemingly demonstrates little affinity for Novi. Novi demonstrates little affinity for Dearborn. Dearborn doesn't seem very connected to Ferndale or Farmington, and so on and so on. And as someone who's lived in places around the country where regional efforts are a little more of a given, Michigan has always seemed to me like an archipelago of communities where everybody is on their own island. And I think sometimes that can act to the detriment of the overall region. So that's why this quote about the idea of what binds us together struck me. Communities around the country that also have fallen into this idea of how we bind together have been beginning to see that there is value in developing regional transportation. If you look at cities like St. Louis, Phoenix, Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Dallas, Charlotte, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, even Norfolk, Virginia, they have all developed light rail systems. we're still trying to figure out how to link our buses. So that contrast really struck me. With that idea of looking at transportation from a regional perspective, I've invited two speakers here today. They're here to address about regional transportation, where it's going in Southeast Michigan, why it's important to us, what the challenges are, whether we're making progress, why not. The first is Megan Owens, who's the Executive Director of Transportation Riders United. The second is Conan Smith, who's the Executive Director of the Michigan Suburbs Alliance, and of course, Wahstenaw County Commissioner. We'll follow up their presentation with a Q&A, where we'll include Jesse Bernstein, who's on the board of the AATA, to answer some of your questions. Okay, more formal introductions. So Megan Owens, as I mentioned, is the Executive Director of Transportation Riders United. TRUE is Detroit's nonprofit transit advocate dedicated to improving and promoting public transit throughout the greater Detroit. Megan serves on the Oakland County Public Transit Authority, which oversees smart bus service in Oakland County, on the Transportation Advisory Committee of the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, MCOG. She's active with the statewide Transform and Let's Get Moving coalitions. She's a lifelong Michigan resident. She graduated from University of Michigan School of Natural Resources and Environment with a concentration in environmental policy. Can you give her a round of welcome?
Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's great to see that even on a beautiful summer night, all of you folks are interested enough in the topic of transportation and regional transportation to come out and be a part of this discussion. I really do hope it can be something of a discussion. Conan and I will each give some sort of introductory remarks, a little bit of an overview, but then I do want to hear your thoughts and ideas and questions and see where we can take it from there. As Jeff said, my name is Megan Owens. I'm the Director of Transportation Riders United. TRUE is an organization that's been working for over a decade now on ways to improve and promote public transit throughout the greater Detroit area. And I will admit we sometimes debate to what extent is Washtenaw County part of the greater Detroit area, which I suppose is even part of the topic tonight, but especially in Detroit and its immediate suburbs, there's obviously been decades of struggle with transportation issues and the need to improve public transportation. We really see transportation as essential, public transportation as essential, not only in terms of getting people from point A to point B, but this is about a lot more than just mobility. It's about transportation equity, making sure that everyone is able to be a full and active member of our society, no matter what their physical or financial condition may be. It's also about economic development, making our communities more vibrant, attractive, successful places. And I could do I have in fact done whole hour-long sessions about the economics behind transit. But it's also about a quality of life. It's one of those things that in an effective community, whether it's Portland or somewhere like that, you don't have to think about it. Because the transportation is there and you have ways to get around, it really helps create that vibrancy and that quality of life that people then just take for granted until you're in a place where there isn't enough transportation options, where people are really struggling and working in downtown Detroit. I see it every day of people waiting hours for a bus, people losing their jobs because they've been, just yesterday, I was talking with someone who had a landlord of a building who had to lay off an employee because she just couldn't get there on time. He was willing to be flexible for the first, second, third time that she was half an hour late because the bus couldn't get her to work. But after the fifth, sixth, seventh time, how is someone supposed to run a business if their employees can't get there? And how is an employee supposed to be productive and effective in our society if transportation isn't there? So I'm not going to spend too much time on why transit matters, because I imagine most of you guys wouldn't be here if you didn't think it was essential. But I do think it is important to ground our discussion in why this is so essential to people's everyday lives, and why, I mean, every one of us could be one broken leg or one broken down transmission from being completely dependent on the transportation system, on the public transportation system. And in places like Ann Arbor, if just about all the places you need to go, live, work, shop, play, are all within the network, within Ann Arbor, then you have a pretty good system for where you need to go. But if you need to cross some of those boundaries, ATA is doing more and better jobs of reaching out to other parts of the region, but our lives don't stop at the borders of our city or our county, or they certainly shouldn't, because I probably should have noted, I actually grew up in Ann Arbor. Pleased that even my mom and stepdad are here, still living here in Ann Arbor after 35 years or so. But I love Ann Arbor, and I think it's got incredible things to offer, but it doesn't have everything. And I'm a little disappointed looking back that growing up, I probably visited Chicago more often than I visited Detroit. And I knew a lot more about Chicago's cultural institutions and its waterfront and its restaurants than I did about Detroit, which is just 45 minutes away. And I think that's a real problem for every one of us who misses out on so many more opportunities, misses out on so many connections to other people, to other experiences, to other opportunities. I even just think about the number of students who go to the university here, come from somewhere else in Michigan or from somewhere else across the country, and spend 4 years, and they love Ann Arbor. They want something a little bigger, so they move to Chicago or Atlanta or DC. They don't even necessarily think about Detroit and our region and staying in our state, because they haven't had those experiences of what Detroit, as Michigan's big city, has to offer. So there's my sort of background from why this topic is so important, why transit is so important, and why those regional connections are so essential. So I'm going to go through a pretty quick PowerPoint about regional transit and some of the ideas that are being discussed about a regional transit authority, and then I'll pass it off to Conan. So hopefully that little flickering won't drive anybody too nuts. But as I mentioned, Transportation Riders United, that's our organization. We're a nonprofit group that's been working since 1999 on ways to improve and promote transit. That includes both the bus service, but then also breaking down the barriers to real rapid transit and making sure that the types of investments we're making type of transportation investments we're making are smart investments. So we've fought against some big highway widening, spending $1 billion to add another lane to 94, things like that. And then also trying to make sure that we are investing sufficiently in public transit. So, and just a little bit of background, my board would be mad at me if I didn't give you a little bit of a pitch about who we are, what we do. But we really work to build the case of why transit is so essential, ensure that we're building that public understanding and support, and then convincing our elected officials, our decision makers, that transit is really something worth investing in. We also act as a watchdog along the different transportation projects and encourage people to give it a try, see if there's a public transit service that can work for them. So, I do want to note, sometimes, I don't think this problem happens as much in Ann Arbor, but sometimes in Detroit, people say, oh, there is no transit. Well, no, we have transit. In fact, we have a lot. We have a lot of different transit providers who are not very well coordinated at all. City service, DDOT is, the city of Detroit runs its own bus service, unreliably, as I note. The SMART is the suburban bus service for certain communities who choose to opt into a property tax millage to support the bus system in mostly the inner ring suburbs, and with some connections to Detroit, but only during rush hour. There's also the people who move around downtown. There's also, you can even take a bus to Windsor. That's a nice connection. Obviously, ATA here. There's also the Amtrak service. So we have a lot of different transit providers, and this doesn't even get into some of the different private services or some of the smaller community type of services. We have a ton of transit, but it's very rarely, it's not very well coordinated. It is very difficult to connect between different parts of our community. And that's why it's so essential that we have a well-integrated network. Eventually, we'd really like to see not only the buses and the paratransit service, but also quick commuter trains that would connect between Ann Arbor and the airport and Detroit and Royal Oak and Mount Clemens and elsewhere. We also want to see high-quality light rail or other rapid transit along our major corridors. We also see as a part of the network the bike and pedestrian access, and even the high-speed trains that there are efforts to improve. So when we look at transit and regional transit, we want to see all of these pieces, but the pieces individually only take you so far. You need that connection. I like this image here. I don't know how well you can see, but people are hopping right off of a commuter train, walking across the tracks, going straight to the light rail that takes them right into the heart of downtown. I think that was Dallas. So another liberal bastion that has figured out transit. So a lot of people don't realize that in addition to the great county plan that Wahstenaw County has been working to develop over the last probably 2 years or more, on what do you need in the way of transit, the Detroit area also did the same. It was approved by the heads of Wayne, Oakland, Macomb counties and the city of Detroit back in 2008. And it does include a wide range of improvements for the Tri-County area, including improving bus service and information and that key coordination, adding new arterial rapid transit, something of enhanced express bus service along major corridors at a much higher frequency, and also some initial rapid transit along areas like Woodward and, of course, the commuter train out to the airport in Ann Arbor from Detroit. So this just shows sort of a first step, but eventually they want to add in all sorts of different rapid transit lines, commuter connections, over the course of the next 20 years, really rolling out a robust system. And there was some discussion about how do we connect beyond the Tri-County area, but as you can see, this could mesh extremely well with the plan that Washtenaw County put together in terms of ensuring that everyone, no matter where they are, can count on there being transportation to get them where they need to go, even if that crosses city lines or county lines. But there are two big challenges. One is we need to have a regional transit authority. We need to have an entity, an agency that can coordinate all of these different transit services and can manage how do you bring all of these different pieces together. And you need to have dedicated funding for it. Those are the two big challenges, and honestly the two big barriers that have prevented some of this from moving forward in the past. There has been legislation introduced and that's even made some progress in the state Senate that the governor has been strongly behind, that would a regional transit authority to coordinate current services, provide some new funding options, one agency in charge of transit, and someone in charge of figuring out how do we improve and expand what we have. Right now, at least in the Detroit area, ATA is doing a good job of trying to figure out all of that for Washtenaw, but for the full Southeast Michigan area, there isn't anyone in charge of doing that, and that's been a real barrier. So yeah, legislation was introduced. It would actually include a 4-county, so not only Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, but also Washtenaw County and the city of Detroit, all under one umbrella agency that would address some of these issues. It would better coordinate transit among not only SMART and DDOT, but also AATA and the other agencies I mentioned across the 4-county region. It would start rolling out rapid transit, at least rapid bus service, along 4 major corridors, including something between Ann Arbor, the airport, and Detroit, and so we can get the train service finally up and running. And it would put before voters a vehicle registration fee, a small $20 or so added to when you're registering your car, that would actually fund all of these essential transit connections to move forward. Again, to be up to the voters as to whether that is something that they would support. All right, governance, professional staff, citizens advisory, probably don't need to get to that level of detail. But again, this is it's really been stalled recently, trying to get the political will to make it happen. Trying to get all of these different agencies and entities across this pretty massive 4-county area to agree and recognize that to be able to share power, authority, governance, and to address these financial issues, to a willingness to invest. This is just the latest of dozens of efforts that have, at least in the past, failed. And one of the reasons we think that they have failed is that insufficient political will and public pressure, that demand to say, we have got to do something about this, enough is enough. So we're certainly at True working on overcoming some of those barriers, demonstrating the broad public support that does exist to get our county and city leaders on board with it, and to convince our elected officials that transit really is worth investing in. And I do want to take a moment to invite you to get involved. You can both find out more about True and our work at DetroitTransit.org or on Facebook, where I did provide some materials up front here. And then also, one of the things that we're doing is a transit bill of rights to try to draw attention to our transit decision makers of how important this is. So if this is something that you do have a real interest in, I invite you to at least join True's email newsletter. I can keep you posted on different activities and events, but then also to talk with your legislators and to, I think we'll probably talk more about other ways that you can weigh in and get involved. But that is what I wanted to share with you, and I will, I guess, are you going to do a...
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to your questions in a few minutes.
I gave you the formal intro, so as you get So Conan Smith has been an elected member of the Wahstenaw County Board of Commissioners since 2005. Since 2010, he served as the chair of the board. Since 2004, Conan has been the executive director of the Michigan Suburbs Alliance, a nonprofit organization that unites and strengthens metropolitan Detroit's mature suburbs by elevating regional cooperation, reforming public policies, and innovating redevelopment strategies. An ardent environmentalist, Commissioner Smith is a nationally recognized leader on land use, transportation, and energy issues. He advises the People and Land program of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, serves on the board of directors of Michigan Saves, and is an executive committee member at SEMCOG. Conan was born here in Ann Arbor, so we have a common theme between our speakers, where he lives today with his wife, Michigan State Senator Rebecca Warren. Conan attended the residential college at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. If you could welcome Conan Smith.
Jeff, thank you, and thanks to Concentrate for pulling this stuff together. It's always so fun to get.
Stand in the light so people can actually see you.
These kinds of forums are so fun in Ann Arbor because we have such a brilliant community, and the opportunity to really engage on issues like this, which can be complex in their detail, although for many of us they seem simple at the macro level. One of the great things about the transit debate in Washtenaw County that we've been having for the past several months as AATA considered its expansion countywide, you never really heard voices saying we don't need transit. What you heard were great voices saying, where is that going to take, where's that transit going to grow? What is the concentration of our transit service? How much resource concentration are we going to get in a given place here versus somewhere else? But it was never in Washtenaw County a question of don't do transit. And that was a very exciting dialogue to be a part of. It's very similar when we start to talk about regional transit issues as well. Megan, who has been a great ally of mine over the past 15 years or so, as we've worked on regional transit issues, and since she took over at True, has worked on transit millages for SMART for, I think, 4 iterations now. And the SMART millage always passes with 70% of the vote. It's a very well-supported system. Similarly, here in Washtenaw County, you see great citizen support for transit systems. The question now is, where do we go from here? How do we grow? What do we become as a region it as a metropolitan region that is larger than just Ann Arbor, larger than just Detroit. How do we connect these amazing assets that we have, cultural assets down in the city, with the academic and intellectual resources we have here to grow Michigan's economy, to make our whole metropolitan area stronger, and bring our state and our region back as national and global leaders? I want to talk just very briefly about these 3 points on what the Regional Transit Authority is. Megan did a great job of describing its evolution from the Regional Transit Coordinating Committee's planning process, and when Governor Snyder stepped in last year to engage Wahstenaw County. The biggest takeaway, if people ask you what is the RTA, it is an inter-county system. It is not your local bus system. It's not the ride. It is not DDOT. It is not SMART. It is not Chelsea's system. It is not the paratransit system. It is a system that connects Detroit to Ann Arbor, that connects Detroit to Mount Clemens, Detroit to Pontiac, Pontiac to Mount Clemens. It's an inter-county system. It's highly focused on rapid transit, on key corridors that are already highly traveled. For example, in Washtenaw County, we have about 40,000 people every day who go into Wayne County for work. So focusing on those corridors where you see high levels of traffic, where there are great opportunities to serve the people with an alternative mode of transportation. The second thing that Megan mentioned that I think is important to grab onto is its regional coordination and regional planning. It doesn't make any sense in a metropolitan area of our population and with our interconnectivity from an economic standpoint that it's difficult for you to get from Ann Arbor to Detroit to Mount Clemens to Toronto, that you would have to get 4 or 5 different bus tickets, make several exchanges in order if you wanted to take transit from one place to another. Earlier this year, the Transform Coalition that Megan and I serve on the management team for hosted Transportation Odyssey, and I think they concentrate, or Metro Mode reported on that. Metro Mode reported on the Odyssey, so if you go on to metromodemedia.com and just type in Odyssey, you can get a nice little synopsis of that attempt to take transit around the state of Michigan. How long folks had to wait, how many exchanges they had to go through in order to just get from one very common destination to another. So that planning process that brings our communities together, that makes sure that our great transit providers are integrated in a way that makes sense, that you have perhaps, this is all speculation at this point, but imagine if you had a single fare card, you know, like they have in Toronto or DC, where you can use it on the bus system here in Ann Arbor or the bus system in Detroit. If you want to go from Detroit into Ann Arbor, that fare card can divide that rate, that fare for you. You don't have to think about getting that transfer or adding in, buying another ticket, getting off a bus, buying a ticket, and getting on another bus. The communications technology that we have right now enables us to do really fantastic coordination. Beyond that, the planning stuff that Megan talked about. How do we think more deeply about this region and how we grow it from a transportation perspective? Here at the University of Michigan, there's a great team up at the Transportation Research Institute that is looking at multimodal transportation in a way that is fundamentally different than it's been approached anywhere else in America, I think. Thinking not about moving people from point A to point B, but thinking about that process of transportation. How do you engage your transportation network, and how does it serve you as a human being and as a community in very vibrant ways? And Sue Zielinski, who heads that, is doing this incredible work all over the world in places like Singapore, and yet here, where she lives, in metropolitan Detroit, we haven't been able to take that giant leap yet to build a world-class transit system. So that the RTA provides a forum for that kind of planning to take place. And again, I want to emphasize, especially because my friends from ATA are spotted all over the room, and I want them to yell at me later, this is not your local bus system. This is not providing service on Main Street to get us around the city of Ann Arbor. This is about connectivity between the systems, among the systems that serve the entire metropolitan region. Megan also mentioned how do you pay for it. She said, we've got legislation that's sponsored up in the Senate right now. I think that might be my wife's bill, Rebecca Warren's bill, to give us a fee for regional transit. It's a vehicle registration fee that would run between $30 and $40, but there are lots of other. That happens to me all the time too. That my Google Drive just stops. I have to uninstall it. It's between $30 and $40 for the vehicle registration fee, but that's one small part of the funding scheme that could support a regional transit system. Incidentally, that $30 to $40 fee would raise about $9 million out of Washtenaw County proper, and according to the legislation that's been crafted and is being discussed, at least 80% of that has to stay in Washtenaw County, has to focus on system improvements right here at home. Beyond that, there's the fare box. Obviously, it's still going to cost you to buy a ticket to get on the bus to take that trip from Ann Arbor into Detroit. There are grants that we are not competitive for currently at the federal level, unfortunately. And those of you who have been on the journey with all of us about the Ann Arbor to Detroit commuter rail system know that our lack of a regional authority and the kind of planning that we're doing has been an actual impediment to us getting better resources for that particular project. And then finally, one of the great opportunities that is provided by what we call fixed route transit systems is the development potential and the opportunity to capture some of that economic growth that's brought about when you have a consistent stop that connects two highly populated areas. If you were to fly over, and actually you can do this on what's the Google Earth, right? Yeah, thank you. If you were to fly over Washington, D.C., you can actually see, based on the development patterns, where there are transit stops, because there's a significant concentration of development, of economic activity around those transit stops. Being able to do a tax increment finance scenario where we're capturing some of that, that immediate economic growth to support the operation or development of a regional transit system is another way that we can put money into it and make it more self-sufficient. Carolyn Graue's here from Centers for Independent Living. She's their Advocacy and Education Director. Did I get that right, Carolyn? And she brought some material with her that I hope you'll pick up here about Complete Streets, a process that helps you think about the holistic integration of your transit and transportation systems with your community development, building those vibrant downtown places where interaction happens, where economic activity happens, and hopefully, support for transit happens. The last thing I want to talk about is why it matters, and this is actually somewhat personal to me. This is not Washtenaw County's perspective or the Suburbs Alliance perspectives. This is really just Conan Smith's perspective on why we should have a regional system. The first of those is we have an aging population. I drove my aunt this morning up to the hospital. It's not my aunt. But with an aging population, we want to make sure that there are lots of transportation options for people to get to the services and amenities that we have throughout the region. As you age, as our population ages hopefully gracefully, we don't want to see people cut off from the amazing things that we have in the metropolitan region. As you lose your physical abilities because of age, your eyesight declines perhaps, your reaction time declines, the fear that comes alongside that should not stop you from participating in our community. It should not serve as a barrier to you getting to be a part of all the great things that we experience in the day-to-day in our younger years. Moreover, I'm not sure if these show up pretty well actually, I'm glad. This is information from the census about segregation in the metropolitan area. We all have heard, well I don't know if we've all heard, but maybe if you haven't, let me tell you. Metropolitan Detroit continues to be the nation's most segregated metropolitan region in terms of race and economics. And right here in Ann Arbor, where we think of ourselves as very progressive and very integrated, we sometimes fool ourselves. These two statistics show the Ann Arbor metropolitan area and the Detroit metropolitan area. Take a look at these circles. This is the dissimilarity index, the likelihood that you will interact with a person of a different race from you for each of our communities. Notice how parallel they are. Ann Arbor and the city of Detroit. And the city of Detroit has a much higher concentration of African Americans. You'll see that on the right here, that big yellow bar. blacks who live in Detroit, but overall as a city, your likelihood of having an experience of interacting with a person from a different race from you is very small. So we do have a challenge here in metropolitan Detroit, and it is part of our larger developmental system. We have communities, whole communities that are 90% black and 90% white. If we want to start breaking down some of the racial and economic barriers that have kept us apart, a solid regional transit system is one way to do that. Making sure that we have access to each other's communities and a means by which we participate in their community life. This one is our housing and transportation costs for the region. You may be familiar with the Center for Neighborhood Technology out of Chicago. They have a great database. You can go in and play around looking at the average housing cost and the average transportation cost, or the aggregate of the two, for any census tract in the United States. What we have here in Washtenaw County is 50% of your income, on the low end, 50% of your income is going to housing and transportation costs. In most of our poorer neighborhoods, if you drill down into the poorer census tracts, that number can creep up to 60, 70, or 80% of your income going to just housing or transportation. And transportation in metropolitan Detroit is a disproportionate portion of that distribution. So making sure that we have a strong regional transit system that allows people to get from their home to their workplace to the amenities that they need, the services that they need, can help reduce that cost burden on folks, put more income in their pockets for things like food, essential medical care, or education. A sidebar on education for just a second. I heard on the Diane Rehm show a couple months ago a gentleman talking about how our generation, my generation, is the first in leadership not to invest in improving the public access to education based in a global competitiveness, from a global competitiveness perspective. So for example, back in the 1800s, we knew that in order to be a strong and competitive member of society, you had to have at least an 8th grade education. We made that compulsory, and we funded it publicly. A few decades later, we made high school education compulsory. We funded it publicly. We all know that global competitiveness now depends upon getting that bachelor's degree, but we have not taken the step to publicly fund it. And the reason I tie this back to our transportation and housing costs is the higher those are, those individuals who are using that 70–80% of their income on housing and transportation are not going to be able to set aside the critical resources that they need to get their kids into college and have them active participant leaders in a global society. And then there's this question of the region. And like Megan said, I too spent more time in Chicago than I did in Detroit growing up. And that's tragic, considering it's a 45-minute drive, maybe an hour by train, and the incredible resources that are downtown. The architecture that is there is second to none in the United States of America. Incredible historic buildings. The opportunity to go to the Detroit Institute of Arts or to the Detroit Zoo, to participate in a Tigers game or Lions game. Now the Lions are back. They weren't there when we were growing up. So, missing out on those opportunities because we had, frankly, economic and racial segregation concerns, but also because access was an issue for us, shouldn't be our future in metropolitan Detroit either. We also have economic considerations that I think matter very much for those of us who want to see the University of Michigan and the city of Ann Arbor to continue its prominence and relevance in a global society. If we're going to attract the best and the brightest to the University of Michigan, it makes sense that we are part of a global conversation, part of a global economy in a significant way. Ann Arbor, Michigan is not going to be that place. Detroit, Michigan could be. Our core city is our global brand, and making sure that that city is strong and that the academic resources that we have here are directly connected to it should be a big part of our future. And I've already mentioned the fact that, no I haven't actually, Washtenaw County has a vision, the county government has a vision of Washtenaw County as a world-class community. And for us to be a world-class community, if we look at our peers in Austin, in DC, in Atlanta, smaller communities in Europe, because a big city in Europe is really big, or big cities in Asia. Even those smaller communities, they all have public transportation that is regional and coordinated. Metropolitan Detroit also remains the only metropolitan area in the United States without a comprehensive transportation system. So if we really want to be a world-class community, regional transit has to be a part of our future. So, Jeff, thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to grabbing Jesse and talking more with you all in Q&A.
Yeah. So, I don't know, thank you so much. If you look over the last few months and concentrate, we've been occasionally doing stories about where we're trying to look at transportation from some angles that some people may not think of. We did a story about how volunteers, tutors, and volunteers can get to communities outside of Ann Arbor to help out. For instance, I sit on the board of 826 Michigan, which is, if you're not aware, is a writing and literacy nonprofit in downtown Ann Arbor. If you don't know it, you probably know the Robot Store. That's our organization. And we did a story about how difficult it was for 826 volunteers, many who are students at U of M, to get to Ypsilanti to do tutoring. If they did not have a car, and many didn't, it was really hard. And thus, our programs in Ypsilanti are constantly struggling to attract the volunteers it needs in the school system that needs that leg up. There are issues that go beyond this. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about regional transportation, my wife is a surgeon at the university, and her research is racial disparities in care. And one of the biggest issues in terms of that disparity, especially on an economic level, is transportation. People will not go to chemotherapy appointments because they can't get there. Or it's difficult for them to get there. They have to recruit someone to drive there. So it becomes a healthcare issue. And then just to show you how much of a transportation geek I am, as a side gig, I'm a film critic. And I often drive out towards Detroit to go see screenings. And as a little experiment for myself, I started keeping track of how long it took me at rush hour, because I would be leaving at about 5:30, to get to a screening in, say, Novi or Birmingham. And over the 6 years I've been doing this, my commute has increased between my home and US 23 by 11 minutes. So that gives you an idea of, just in 6 years, how much traffic has increased. So if you think that mass transit is only about helping people who work in Ypsi, bus our tables in Ann Arbor, I'm trying to encourage you to think that it's much bigger than that. It's a bigger issue. For our Q&A, we'll take questions from the audience. Please try and make it a question rather than at some point you want to make. The idea is to try, I'm happy to facilitate a discussion, but sometimes people like to go on about their point before they actually deliver a real question. So I'd like you to try and actually ask real questions. Jesse, do you want to come on up? Jesse is on the board of the AATA, of course, Megan Owens and Conan, and I will hand the mic off to you. Oh, thank you. Since you're in the middle, is that okay? So, is there someone we can start with? Sure.
I have a question for Jeff, that might be also for Conor County was involved with this. In our little microcosm of Washtenaw County and AATA's initiative, which I think I applaud tremendously, to have a more county-wide system that connects to the rest of the world. There's been a huge debate about the entity that will take over for transportation in the county and replace, have representation from all the various entities that put money in. And I was quite dismayed, although I understand this to some extent, that there was a last-minute amendment to change how the board would be governed to like 4/5, which seems unworkable to me.
Can you ask the question?
Yeah, I'm getting there. How I want to know how do you see that entity actually functioning given that level of dysfunction before you're getting off the ground?
Well, I chair the AATA board and I facilitate a group of representatives from the other areas in the county. And I'm very encouraged for the future. What happened in the county and that concern that was expressed by commissioners and was voted on only had to do with amending the Articles of Incorporation, which is not a very important issue for day-to-day operations. So as from my position and looking forward, I don't see that as a problem. What we are doing now, as we speak, is we are preparing a 5-year plan, which includes service and financing. It's the first 5 years of our 30-year vision, and that's going to come out tonight. And then there will be extensive discussions throughout the county. We have district advisory committees in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and throughout the county with groups of townships and villages that have banded together, and we'll be talking with them. It'll be up on the web. We have opportunities for people to give us input in person as well as on the web, and we welcome all of that. And then once that occurs, then we will know when to move forward with incorporating a new board that will include the whole county. So I'm encouraged. I don't see a problem with the amendment. I think the 3 government units have been working very hard to get an agreement. And as far as I know, I've only been in this community 43.5 years. It's the first time I've ever seen anything like that happen. So it's encouraging.
Is there another question?
Can I just layer in too that I run a coalition of governments that has 22 different cities, and they operate on a consensus basis to determine investments in the multiple millions of dollars. It's all about the people that you put on that board and how they work together. And I'm confident that the communities that are participating in the transit system, the countywide transit system, are not there to undermine it. So they're going to send good, smart, supportive advocates there who are going to work collaboratively. And that 4/5 threshold, I suspect, will end up being a low bar. I expect you guys to have nearly unanimous votes.
Yeah.
Lots.
What do you define as the RTA? What area?
So legislatively, it's the counties of Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw, their entire geographies. There are service aspects that are smaller. So the main routes that are, I think, articulated in the legislation themselves connect Ann Arbor to Detroit, Pontiac to Detroit, Mount Clemens to Detroit, and Pontiac to Mount Clemens. Do that right, Megan?
Pretty much, yeah.
I have a question because I have used transit recently and enjoyed it thoroughly. The ride to the airport was a delight, and I took Megabus to Chicago. It was equally a delight. Is there a way we can capture demographic data that would enable us to give strength to the work that you're doing? Because I saw on these buses people that looked like me and people that didn't look like me, and business people and students, and it seems that some of what you're doing setting a vision, but it's happening right under our noses, and it becomes real when you know who those people are that are already using it.
Yeah, we have data that we use through SEMCOG and Watts that tells us where people are going when they leave their house. And it's tens of thousands who are coming into Ann Arbor and tens of thousands who are going out. And we've looked at that data to figure out what makes sense. AATA strongly supports the notion of transit corridors and services, and our bus to the airport was one example of that. And we look forward to the service aspect of the RTA going forward.
Yeah, I guess so expanding a little bit on what you were saying, I think you're right. There is some incredibly powerful data out there, both about people who are using transit now, people who travel between the different parts of our Southeast Michigan region. I don't know that you referenced some of the numbers on how many people come into Washtenaw County. The numbers of people who travel every day between these 4 different counties are enormous. There's also incredible data about the aging of the population and how essential it's going to be to provide these transportation services to our seniors. Unfortunately, sometimes data is not enough to get elected officials to do the right thing. I wish it were enough. I wish enough of the right facts and enough of the right powerful personal stories could break past some of the barriers. But I can tell you, in the Southeast Michigan area, especially on the eastern end, we still have a whole lot of division. We still have a whole lot of people who may live in Oakland or Macomb County who never even think about going south of 8 Mile Road, let alone, I mean, heck, not even south of 14 miles sometimes. There's still these powerful divisions between parts of our region. And sadly, there are politicians in the northern Oakland and Macomb area who really don't see how this will help them. Who really don't see, well, my constituents won't ride it, therefore why should I bother? Or it's just a big bailout for Detroit. Or all of these fallacies that, despite a lot of facts and data, it can be hard to overcome. But that said, we need to keep pushing. We need to keep gathering that information, keep pushing the facts about how essential this is for so many different people. This isn't just about getting low-income people to work. As we've all referenced, this is an essential service for every component of our lives. And even if it is just about getting those low-income people to work, who do you think is again, busing the restaurants and ensuring that our society can keep moving forward? So anyway, a little bit of a rambling answer, but I think you bring up some excellent points.
This question, I guess, is first for Megan, but also it's for Conan. As you all watch what Jesse is doing, I was wondering if there could be a parallel to what we are experiencing in Ypsilanti. We have the interest of the state of Michigan on how our education system gets consolidated. They've had problems in Arbor, they have had problems in Detroit. They're really interested in what's going to happen over there, and they are present. You can feel them. My question is whether Detroit and the region is looking on the struggles that we are fighting out here to make this transportation thing happen as a model for what can roll out for the rest of the region.
I guess I would say, for one thing, it is important to note that the governor has been very strongly supportive of these regional transit authority efforts. He has dedicated one of his senior policy advisors to work full-time on how to bring this region together, how to work through some of the political barriers and develop a regional transit authority, because he does recognize how essential transit is and regional transit to, especially to the economic growth and development of our region. I haven't necessarily seen it as a model, but we are always looking for effective models of what works. I like to say in Detroit, there's got to be some benefit about being the last in the country to develop real rapid transit. You can learn from everyone else and not have to reinvent the wheel. So we in fact are working with a number of academic researchers on what has every other major metropolitan area done? How have they gotten through some of these barriers? Because they have, as much as we like to think we're unique, they have a lot of the same issues of racial conflict, of city-suburban issues, of financial struggles, of bringing different political bodies together, and they've figured out. So we are looking throughout the country at different examples of how we can learn and move forward.
I think the easy answer there is no. Nobody's looking at the work that AATA did. Nobody from Southeast Michigan is looking at the work that AATA did as a model for them, and that is really unfortunate because the way that this whole effort evolved was fantastic, and it does have a great Washtenaw County flavor to it. One thing that is very distinctive here in Washtenaw County from the balance of the metropolitan region is when you pull people together to tackle a challenge here in Washtenaw, they come to the table and they put things on the table. In Southeast Michigan, they come to the table and they look to see what they can take away from the table. It's a very big cultural difference that enabled us, I think, to move a very progressive and thoughtful transit plan forward that there are lessons that could be learned for the rest of the metropolitan area. As we go into the RTA conversation, that's been one of my big points to make to my fellow county officials, that we have to approach this regional collaboration not thinking what we get out of it, but thinking about what we can build if we all put good things into it.
I have a question I'll give you. So can you, all three of you, will you address the issue of whether you'll hear this argument, well, Metro Detroit isn't dense enough for public transportation. So address that argument.
Metro Detroit is dense. So there are plenty of examples from around the country. Phoenix, Arizona, for example, communities that are less dense than metropolitan Detroit that do have fine regional public transportation systems. So again, the density argument is somewhat of a fallacy. However, I will never step away from saying we need to focus and concentrate our development in a better way so that we do have even more dense communities. So right now, I think Ann Arbor's density is somewhere around 7 or 8 people per acre. Does that sound right? That sounds high. And you know, some of the research shows that the optimal density for a local transit agency is more like 11. So there's lots of room for us to concentrate development and put more people on less land, which has great environmental impacts from a sustainability perspective, and gives us real opportunities in terms of resource concentration and tax collections and where we can put them to design and build great communities. If we want to do the complete streets work, for example, that Carolyn's advocating for, having higher density nodes that are well served by public transportation should be a central component of that. That's not to say that every neighborhood that you live in is going to have 11 people per acre. But certainly there should be places that can be well served by transit that do have and support that density.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Well, yes, statistically, yes. If you look at the top metropolitan areas in the country and look at their density, the Southeast Michigan area is pretty darn right in the middle. It's pretty average. So there are a lot of communities that are more dense, but a lot of communities that aren't. So that certainly isn't the barrier that's preventing us from having more effective transit. That said, I think having more effective, especially rapid transit, rail-based transit, can be a great way to increase our density, because throughout the country, a lot of people want to live, work, shop, play, and dine near convenient rapid transit. Developers know that, and all across the country, billions of dollars, even in this economy, billions of dollars are being invested in new lofts, condos, apartments, hotels, bars, restaurants, near convenient rapid transit stations. There are studies that have shown that fully a third of the population wants to live in that more walkable, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use area where you can access all of your daily needs with a quick walk or transit ride. Only about 2% of Michigan provides that. So why are we surprised that so many of our young people are moving out of state if we're not providing the type of places they want to be? So that's yet another, it's not an excuse not to build transit, but it is another way transit can help reinvigorate our economy by creating more of these vibrant, dense nodes of opportunity.
Go ahead. Every time I see one of these plans for Metro Detroit, whether it's for planning or transportation, it always talks about Wayne, Macomb, Oakland, and Washtenaw. But living here in Ann Arbor area, we see so many people who are coming here to both go to school and work, who are coming here from Flint, Toledo, Jackson, Livingston County, Brighton area. And our roads are choked, of course, as you know, with traffic from those areas. And so if Ann Arbor is making that kind of a draw, obviously Detroit is drawing people from Toledo and other areas. And I really think that when you think in terms of regional transportation, you really need to expand your map.
That's an excellent point, and I would say, my only argument or excuse would say, well, we've got to start somewhere. Let's start with the places that have the most people traveling regularly, like this Ann Arbor Metro Airport Detroit connection. That has got to be one of the busiest corridors, or Woodward Avenue in Detroit, between downtown, Midtown, and up to Ferndale, Royal Oak, Birmingham. Let's start with those main corridors of busyness, of traffic, of density. But then you're right, we absolutely need to expand. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to take a train from here to Ann Arbor, not only into Detroit and up to Pontiac, but also out to Mount Clemens, down to Monroe and Toledo. Monroe's gunning for that. They're really enthusiastic to get that type of connection. Beyond Pontiac, up to Flint, Saginaw. 100 years ago, there were all of these rail connections. It was easier to get around on the interurban trains, on these connections. All of these different communities were connected, and there's no reason they shouldn't be. So you're right, that we definitely need to think beyond what given how challenging it's been to get four counties together, maybe we'll start there, but the RTA does allow for additional communities to be added in.
We definitely need to do something about getting up to Livingston County. That's where we live. I-96 and 23 coming together there, that's a route that's very important, and a secondary route in Detroit, by the way. Tonight, when we came in, traffic was stopped from 8 Mile all the way to Ann Arbor because of one small accident. And it's always bad.
Because people have no choices.
Bad. We have no choices. Now they're proposing a Wally system or something like that, but I know there's a lot of resistance to it.
Yeah, especially,
I don't know.
Yeah, Livingston County is not thrilled with it. The local papers came out with an editorial dramatically opposed. The county commission is opposed. The plan was actually first recommended by Mayor Heathja, and since then the Ann Arbor Transportation Authority has taken over responsibility for managing that and moving it forward. We recently got a large $640,000 grant to look at the stops and putting in stations. It is so complicated dealing with these issues. To give you one little piece, at Barton and Plymouth Road, the tracks going south are owned by the Ann Arbor Railroad. They will not allow passenger trains to cross Barton. What that means is the train cannot come into downtown Ann Arbor. It cannot go to Briarwood area and the athletic campus. And we have been doing our best to get the Ann Arbor Railroad to open up. That track starts in Traverse City and goes all the way to Florida. And the folks in Toledo are very interested in having a connection between Ann Arbor and Toledo.
So are the folks in Traverse City.
Right. And we can't do it because of all these complications, but at least we're working on it and doing the best we can to get that moving. So please let your folks know what you want.
We're getting close to our time, so we got to end with this.
One question. So what's the opposition? What does it derive from? The Ann Arbor Railroad.
Right. The editorial said initially that it was supposed to be $1 million project. It's now $32 million. They claim they're being lied and swindled and all kind of stuff. And it's really comes down to the money. Money is being spent by the federal government, by the state government to get the tracks and the cars ready. Maybe when that happens and we can continue to educate people about the benefits, we might get somewhere.
And with Ann Arbor Railroad, it's a liability issue. They're convinced that if there's one crash, they're out of business. So, but there should be ways around that. But I think there's at least, do we have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah, we should do one more.
Right in the back?
Right in the back, gentleman against the wall there.
I have two quick questions. One was, I didn't hear kind of an update about where the RTA is in the Senate. And maybe I missed it, because there's an article in the Free Press about there being an announcement the next month or so, and work over the next year about getting it passed. That's question one. The second question is, what do you think the effects of the recent Ann Arbor elections are on the city's willingness to participate in RTA and potential train stations, etc.?
I can't comment on the second, but I can say it with the first. So legislation was introduced at the beginning of the year. It passed with strong bipartisan support through the Senate Transportation Committee, but the Senate Majority Leader hasn't been willing to put it up for a vote on the full Senate floor. There is a whole lot of interest from a whole lot of levels. It isn't just folks like us who are saying that this needs to happen. The billionaires who are building the M1 rail in downtown Detroit are actively reaching out to the legislature and convincing them to support this. The U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, is personally getting involved in weighing in on how essential this is, because the Obama administration wants to see our region succeed, wants to make major investments in transportation, but if there's no entity, no regional agency, there is no one they can really reliably funnel that money to. So there's a lot of support. I'm really hopeful that some of these voices, but the combination of the citizen voices that we've been mobilizing over the last year and beyond, and the powerful business and federal interest may finally be able to sway some of the legislators to get behind it. But at this point, your guess is as good as mine. We're going to keep fighting for it. We're going to keep advocating. If it doesn't happen this year, we'll figure out. We'll look at it again next year, because this isn't an option. Our region will never truly thrive and succeed without an effective transit system that connects not just within our cities, but between our cities. And so this has got to happen, and we're going to keep. We've been fighting this for years. We're going to keep fighting it. With some powerful allies, I am hopeful that we can succeed.
You want to finish it off?
Yeah, to the Ann Arbor question. The Ann Arbor City Council approves the nominees to the Act 55 AATA board who are nominated by the mayor. Other than that, AATA is an independent unit of government. We have our own fiduciary board. We get money from the millage, from federal grants, from the fare box. So I do not expect that the current election is going to have a great impact initially. As far as the RTA goes, we definitely support the service aspect and funding through the motor vehicle fee. We're very concerned about the governance structure. We would be very happy to participate as a Washtenaw County transit authority with an overlay RTA. We are not very interested in being subsumed by the other 3 counties. So that's where our discussions have been. Legislators have been very receptive. I think they're working hard to figure out how to make this work. I just want to underscore what Megan said. The governor is very committed to this and has assigned folks who know Lansing and know how to get the job done. So very encouraging down the road.
No last comments, Tom? All right. Well, I want to say thank you to Megan, Jesse, and Conan. It was a terrific conversation. I'm just going to tell you this one little statistic I looked up that I thought was pretty interesting. I was reading about Norfolk, Virginia's light rail system, and it runs for approximately, I think it's 26 miles. And they considered it a phenomenal success if it could have 3,000 riders a day on average. And how many people commute between Detroit and Ann Arbor daily?
22,000.
About 22,000. That's just from Ann Arbor, not counting Ypsilanti, Northville.
That's Washtenaw County.
That's Washtenaw County? Okay, 22,000. Looking at that from 10%, even 5%, and then taking into consideration the rest of Wayne County, it seems, if that's a phenomenal success to get 3,000 riders a day, it doesn't seem that impossible for our region. So I just thought I'd toss that out. Thank you so much for coming.
Information up here.
We have information up here. And like I said, if you have ideas, suggestions, feel free to email me at chaff@concentratemedia.com. And I want to thank Conor and the Michigan State Housing Development Authority for their support. Good night.